John Kerry, U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate and the former U.S. Secretary of State under President Obama, joins me now. Secretary Kerry, I know this has been an exceptionally busy week for you.
It's busy.
I can't even imagine it, but thank you so much for making time for us tonight. I want to start, broadly speaking, just kind of the big takeaway from this week. And I think a lot of people are wondering what the global community can do to combat climate change. There is a big gap between what the experts are calling for and what the world is doing.
Well, actually, the world has stepped up with promises. And at the last meetings of the global community in Glasgow and in Sharm el-Sheikh, they made promises that would make an enormous difference in pulling us back from the brink. The problem is not everybody's fulfilling those commitments. So the push now is to raise ambition, but in an accountable way, and get the job done. The important thing is we can win this battle. We absolutely can. But we have to deploy more technology, pay more attention, and live up to our promises.
I have spent this week speaking to officials as well on the sidelines of the UN. One theme that I have heard over and over again is the gap between the global South and the global North. Right. You speak to representatives and diplomats from the global South, and they point the finger at the global North and say it was you that contributed to where we are today, and it's you that have to pay up. And so they're talking about financing to try to set up some kind of financing. How do you close that gap? I mean, are we even close to closing that gap?
Well, we have plans to close the gap, and I think there's a huge focus by even the finance community. I met today with asset owners who manage about $11 trillion worth of assets and property. And they're really captured by this. They know that their life is going to be affected, and jobs will be affected. The business community will be affected. Insurance companies will be affected. I mean, there's a massive cascade downstream here. But more and more people are honestly waking up to this, Eamon. And I believe there's a transformation right now. This could be a really impactful meeting of the world in Dubai, in the UAE, in December. And it could really make the difference here. We're on the brink of so many new technologies that are breaking through. People are seeing fusion, for instance, making leaps and bounds of progress. We have new battery storage and batteries coming online. We have green hydrogen being developed. I mean, there is a lot happening and a lot of money moving into those investments to make a difference. President Biden has done an extraordinary job, frankly, of opening up opportunities that are unprecedented. The Inflation Reduction Act, which has encouraged amazing amount of investment in our country, new jobs, and a whole set of initiatives that are changing what the world is doing. The First Movers Coalition, where largest companies in America are making commitments to buy green products now in order to create a demand signal, where you have shipping industry building carbon-free ships. You have the First Movers, which is setting an example for some of the largest corporations in the world, are setting an example for how you can begin to transform more rapidly. And you know, there's the Major Economies Forum, which has produced a whole new, through President Biden, holding a summit at the White House, which has now created a transformation in what the targets are. So I really believe that we're in a place to win the battle if in the next months we make the decisions we have to. Primary among them, we've got to reduce emissions. And we have to primarily guarantee that we're not going to permit new coal-fired power plants anywhere in the world. And I think we're on track to begin to take that seriously.
In terms of reducing emissions, you have countries, and I was interviewing the Iraqi prime minister today, who's desperate to get his country's economy back on track after 20 years of war. But at the same time, a lot of it goes through fossil fuel. How do you convince a leader like the Iraqi prime minister and other countries around the world who desperately seek economic progress through fossil fuel, which is the largest part of their economy, to not do that because the rest of us...
It is today, but they have to buy into this transformation. They have to recognize what the UAE has a national oil company, ADNOC, and the UAE is an oil-producing, gas-producing country. But 15 or 20 years ago, the UAE saw the future and made the decision. They have to begin to diversify. What we need is the old energy companies need to begin to become new energy companies. And that means to transform somewhat. A lot of them are, some of them aren't. Others are choosing to do the things they know how to do, which is to perhaps capture emissions or extract and put back into the earth, to bury it forever. But the marketplace is going to decide who the winners and who the losers are here. The key is that a big energy, oil and gas company ought to just transform into an energy company. And many are trying to do that right now. They're chasing green hydrogen. They're working on new products that are capable of providing the marketplace with a whole set of different choices. Electric vehicles are coming online at record pace. The fact is that the demand for fossil fuels is actually going down to some degree now and will be markedly by the end of this decade. So that change, good CEOs are realizing the future is going to be defined in a clean energy economy, and they're making that commitment.
I want to share with you just the assessment of the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. And it's not to get you to comment specifically on his comments, but he's giving an assessment from the vantage point that he sits in. And certainly anyone who's watching this would say you feel, as we played in the soundbite, are fairly optimistic that something can be done. But, he had a meeting this week. It was a high-level meeting convened. He only allowed remarks by people he felt were taking climate action seriously. China and the United States were not asked to speak at that event.
Well, the reason is that they said that only leaders could speak, and President Biden couldn't be there. And I was there, right. But I'm not the leader of the country. Yeah. So we live by the rules, and the rules were that. But the United States, under President Biden, has been leading in so many different ways. I mentioned the First Movers Coalition. I mentioned the Major Economies Forum, which summoned the 20 largest economies in the world to the White House virtually for a summit. That produced changes and commitments from people all around the world. We raised the ambition. The United States has the Inflation Reduction Act, which is putting more than hundreds of billions of dollars into the new technologies. The United States has been helping other countries in many different ways. I think that the United States can be very proud of the leadership that we have been offering on this. We have a shipping challenge. We now have the largest shippers in the world as a result of our challenge that are transforming their power plants on those ships into carbon-free power plants. We have sustainable aviation fuel being worked on. We have, there's so many different things. It's exciting, but people don't feel all of those changes yet. But the United States and President Biden have been really out front creating these new initiatives. One of them is new nuclear. Right. We have a whole new set of small modular nuclear plants that are being designed. And we have a methane pledge. Methane is responsible for 50% of the warming of the planet, but only 2% of the funding of climate goes to methane. We're now changed that. We started and worked with the EU, put together a methane pledge. We have 155 countries now that have pledged to move forward on methane. Methane is 20 to 80 times more damaging than CO2. And it's the quickest way in which we can reduce the Earth's temperature increase. So those are things that President Biden has set in motion. And I think it's a shame that they couldn't allow someone other than the president to speak. But on the other hand, those are the rules, and we live by them.